Hello and welcome to the IP Author podcast, where we're talking all things AI and IP. I am your host, Saskia van Ryneveld, actress and CEO of Executive Communications Coaching.
This is Sumair here. I am the Vice President of Business Development for IP Author here in Europe.
Sumair, it's a pleasure to talk to you, and I'm really happy to have been able to grab you from last week's episode and have you on again.
Likewise.
So obviously, I'm desperate to know how your watering schedule is going for your plants.
Oh, you remember that?
Yes, exactly. So please tell me, how well is the coordination going, and is it going well?
I think so, yeah. Actually, very well. It rained quite a bunch here over the weekend, and the AI was, on top of it. It sort of
Fantastic.
helped me optimize the amount of sprinkles and so on and so forth, given already it was raining. And I have good news to share. I can already see small needles and needlets of grass.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so that is good news. But I have more to come because it was a couple of varieties that I wanted to sort of cultivate. Which one was the normal grass one, which is good at getting around the garden, and then there's also one that is very good at in shades. So that one takes a few maybe a week more, and that also needs slightly different kind of help overall with moisture and so on and so forth, and which is the job of AI. It knows this variety, and obviously it's now telling me, okay, now is a week when this next one is supposed to germinate, and therefore it would have slightly different water, moisture, and such requirements. So yeah, overall doing a very good job. I'm very happy.
Going well. I think it must be so satisfying to be able to coordinate something from a technology point of view, using AI to help you do something, and then growing something like grass, like plants. It's so lovely because you actually see it happening, and you see, you see the results.
You have a physical verification of or validation of, what you're doing.
Exactly.
It's an actually very important point you made also, which is, I have obviously no background in, or technical background, so to speak, in gardening or such other. Obviously, when I was growing up, I did a bunch of it at home.
Yeah.
But that was this common things everybody would do. But to start this whole thing from scratch, laying the, land down, what kind of soil would be required for this area, what is the amount of sand required, because obviously for grass you're supposed to have a bit of sand there. So it makes a non-skilled person like myself into a ambitious enthusiast of a certain technology or a certain technique, and which is what it is doing in different other technology areas as well, is AI.
Completely.
Is that it uses its ability, its knowledge, or generally the experience of other people, and it applies that skill onto a person who is starting from scratch.
Yeah, which is fantastic, because then you imagine the world that can be opened up to you by using or harnessing AI, getting it to be there as your coach, getting it to be there as your little organizer, as your plant preparation planner, and so on. And it kind of can be there to hold your hand as you can go into a whole world of new interests, new things that you can explore. And you don't have to be an expert now necessarily to be able to enter into that space. But it depends on your willingness to adopt AI. And to harness its capabilities to be able to, to get it to do what you need to do.
Correct. Speaking about interests,
yes.
Last week you also mentioned that you were super happy, and I can understand that, is that Academy Awards obviously are not going to take into consideration any AI-based material. Have you recovered from that sort of this episode of information?
Well, I mean, you know what? I am quite happy that the human element is going to be preserved, but I think that maybe the Academy might have to have their AI generated content or AI filmmaking awards section, of course, to be inclusive if they can. But what has been hilarious has been to see that recently there has been a guy who has been putting himself through the use of AI into lots of different storylines from famous TV series, like things like Game of Thrones, and he's been putting himself in these moments where key characters are either killed off or something terrible happens, and he comes in and changes the whole plot. He saves a beloved character that was killed off in the series, which is fantastic. So again, the kind of creativity that you're given using AI or being able to take advantage of it is now a little bit endless, and I think definitely fans of stories and fans of different TV shows can now see that, not only can you be angry about what happened in the storyline, but you can actually put yourself into the storyline and fix the thing that you think shouldn't have happened. So that's
But how does it work? Like, for example, there is studios made a certain film.
yes,
How would it allow somebody like you and I, for example, to come
yeah.
and start making changes? Obviously, it's not copyright.
No, well, I
It's
wonder.
not.
I that's such an actually a really interesting question. I don't know if that's something that can be done. I suppose that it really, I mean, it's been a free for all a little bit on the internet anyway. People have been able to take clips of films or TV series that have been put out and then obviously make their commentary and so on it. And fans have been able to make their own kinds of trailers and so on. But I think that is a very interesting gray area about what are the limitations of somebody actually putting themselves into that material that has been made and changing the nature of it.
Hmm.
Obviously, we'll never change the actual source material. So the fans of Game of Thrones or the
Mm-hmm.
people who want to go and watch Game of Thrones, the original Game of Thrones will be what it is. But then you'll have all of these spin-offs and all of these
Hmm.
creations based on top of that. I can only
So,
think that it's incredibly satisfying, especially for people, because there was a whole controversy at the end of Game of Thrones about how it ended, that the fans were very upset with
hmm.
the decisions of the story makers. And
Okay.
so,
I
yeah.
see what you mean. Yeah, yeah. Okay.
So there's that. So
So
yeah,
the people have an alternate way of imagining that same scenario from there on. It's
exactly.
interesting because I also remember watching a certain document. Not it was basically a certain actor that went into wild, and
Mhm, mhm,
it had the mandate to stay in a certain jungle or some sort
mhm, mhm,
for I think 48 hours or something like that,
mhm.
and it could make various decisions. Should I sleep here, or should I preserve this bottle of water, or should I drink it later
Yeah.
or have it now? So one could make a decision for them,
Yes.
and then that part of the reality will start to appear. So in
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
case, obviously, if I didn't want X to die in a certain story,
Exactly.
and I don't have it already,
Yeah.
now I
Yeah.
have another universe to look into. That's very interesting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that connects a little bit to what we were talking about in our last episode, which is all about the fact that AI now gives us the opportunity to choose and have all these different options available to us in terms of the things that we want to do and the things that we want to create. And so that is this very exciting element of what this AI revolution has brought us. But now, Sumair, I'm very interested because you're here interacting with lots of people who are taking on AI, who are kind of entering into the space and using the products like IP Author. And I want to know what your observations have been about how people have been experiencing using AI, how they're bringing it into their worlds and their workplaces, and what do you notice is happening in terms of the adoption of AI?
Very interesting. By and large, obviously, there's a positive, a very fast adoption of AI in
Mhm,
variety of ways,
mhm,
right? We also at the same time saw this term coined or rather thrown around a lot called AI tourism, where people would try on a lot of AI.
mm.
And I'm not talking about like at a corporate level, at a enterprise level, where or even people personally, like
Oh,
they
I definitely have done that. I've been jumping between the different models and deciding, which one I think is a little bit of a better experience, whose personality fits my personality. So you're
mm,
seeing that in the same way. That's the AI tourism.
correct, exactly, yeah. So basically, that concept was that a lot of people are trying to understand, as you said, like
Mm,
how does it work,
mm.
right? Before I take a decision, and because it's possible to like try different ways, means of how you want that job to be done, thanks to different models. So you're doing that at the same time. there was this concept that people are not taking residency, which means people are not taking a firm decision, obviously. But at the same time, the overall use of AI is going up and up. So what that tells me is that people obviously are looking for a couple of things here also. They're looking for quality. They're looking, obviously, if we talk about, let's say, corporates, or if we talk about use of AI in various enterprise level projects, people obviously are looking at efficiency as well, and also deployability, right? Which means it's not only enough for me to know that it works well, it has to integrate into the workflow that I have today.
Exactly.
I don't want to.
Yeah, because people don't necessarily want to be starting completely from scratch. They want to be optimizing what they already do, and so it has to integrate with that.
Right. Yeah. So obviously some people are whose whole job is to redefine or disrupt really their workflows wherever possible, but also integrate AI in ways and forms in which it would better be suited to what your ultimate goal is. So yes, therefore, AI tourism in that sense made sense. It made sense because you want to understand what works well and what will integrate well in let's say, my scenario, right? And also I've seen this ourselves. Like, for example, people want to take trials of IP author before they want to deploy. And we also support, we also understand that this is a very important decision people are making. We support that journey, first of all, helping people understand what the tool can do for them, right? Obviously, we are also cross-pollinating ideas from various earlier deployments on newer customers. We help them understand what it can do, right? And as you can imagine, so there are so many more possibilities, that because people have. So what are you trying to do? You're trying to be more efficient. You're trying to create a better work product. So there are therefore hundreds of ways to interact with the tool to be able to achieve that. So what I use IP author for as a patent attorney today would be my best practices. But there could be other patent attorneys, and because it's a, believe it or not, you might think you are the only creative person, but there are all these patent attorneys. It's a craft. It's a craft to draft a certain application in a certain form, to choose a certain say a scope of not being too broad, yet being not super specific, and pinning down your invention to a very small work application, right? So therefore, so that craft, that art has to be, you have to allow an artist like patent attorney, who is obviously not just an artist but also a technical expert, that technology, to pursue that craft, basically allow AI to use it the way the attorney wants it to work for them. So therefore, that deployment that we've learned, or those ways and means of how different patent attorneys use it, could be cross-pollinated from deployment to deployment, and that works very well. So therefore, yes, while this tourism is, people are not right away making decisions, but at the same time, what I've seen is that all of this kind of knowing and trying different things out only sort of validates what you want to do, when you do decide what the right tool is for you. So, and that's exactly what is happening with IP author as well. People taking trials, learning, and sometimes we learn on the way back what people. So people sometimes ask me questions. Hey, is this possible? That I can interact with the tool in a certain fashion, and to be able to do also, let's say, an FTO, right? So sure, we could do it. We are doing a prior art search, and what we have to do is that we have to define the invention in a certain way. We have to take a slightly different kind of an input as opposed to just an invention disclosure. Read the results slightly differently, and also at the same time, what we learn is that here are the ways that we can tweak the model to read the results for an FTO versus, for example, for a novelty search, right? So all of this cross-pollination or ways of learning from each other, getting ideas into the door, overall is improving the system.
I think it sounds like a really exciting time to be in this particular world, because it feels that things are changing and evolving so quickly. We haven't really settled, in the sense that, as you were saying, I like the I like the idea of tourism versus residency. And maybe there is a sense that, people are going around and they're looking at these different places that they might decide to live, and the neighborhoods haven't really been built yet, and they're getting to kind of try out a little house here and there, but they're not, the trees haven't grown, so they don't get a sense of what the street might look like. They don't really know what the parks are going to look like for their children, so they're not quite sure that this is the neighborhood that they want to live in. So they're kind of visiting around. And at the moment, the technology is in that space where all of these developers, all the different companies that are involved in it, that are building things on top of it, they're getting ideas about, oh, maybe we do this, and maybe we put this there, maybe we add a slide here, maybe we add this at the end of the street, maybe we put those different street lamps in. And eventually you'll get the families that are going to move in to live in that particular neighborhood, the people who are going to find their residency in the different AI models that they're using. But at the moment, it's kind of exciting because there's a lot of change and development that's happening. Do you notice a difference in the kinds of people who are doing the tourism versus those who are in the residency stage? Those who are kind of settled and they know what they want and they're happy to be committed to a particular product or a particular model.
Yeah, obviously there is a change. Obviously there are, and not just change of the kind of people, but there are also different people with different levels of appetite, obviously, for the use of AI. So therefore, obviously there are early adopters. So it's not to say actually that people are still only, touristing. There are also people who have made homes, who have resided in different tools. We ourselves have a multi-year contracts with so many of our customers who have found value in trying tools. I was just generally saying that people are curious about this technology because there's a lot of potential. So while obviously I drive my car every now and then, I am also looking at when I am in the Uber, I'm looking at how this car handles a certain maneuver, or for example, or something like that. But yeah, coming back to your question, of course, in each technology there are early adopters, right? There are evangelists of a certain technology that have the vision of how they feel it would change the world for them, right? And they're quick to adopt. And AI is been a technology. Say what you will, it is here to be, right? And those who realize the value of it, those early adopters have taken up positions and are obviously reaping benefits out of those positions. I did a video, I think you were also involved in that video, which was about people who are adopting these tools, right? Any AI tool. For example, let's talk about patent attorney tools, those tools that they adopt. Obviously, as a tool maker, as a tool developer, I would use the feedback of my adopters. Yeah. And therefore, the development of my tool would have a lean towards the current set of people.
Of course. Okay, because it's that feedback mechanism and that cross-pollination that you were saying, that, there's the tool, then you've got the early adopters, and the early adopters are influencing the progression of the tool as much as the tool is giving to the early adopters.
Correct.
Okay, interesting.
So that is obviously also influencing what we are doing.
Yeah.
Therefore, the tools that are getting made, the developments that are happening, is a function of the people who are using that today. So therefore, what it means is that those of us that are using the tool, we are active participants of this whole evolution of how the tools will perform, what features and functionalities will get prioritized, versus those who are, just not super sure yet. Right? Yeah, we don't know really how the world will be in the next few years with respect to many of these aspects. But right now, what we are seeing is that the early adopters have a certain way of obviously influencing the developments, and which is so right. And this story or this theme has been common in various other technologies as well. If you go to any evolution, you will see that people who use the tool more or use a certain technology more were able to influence it for their application more than those who did not, right? And that's what will happen here as well. And it also means that those who are using it are at a prime position to upskill themselves.
Yeah.
Because in next few years, that skill of being better at using a tool is obviously very important. So that way, obviously, there is a very, again, for this aspect as well, very interesting examples I see on a daily basis where what we think was the valuable most feature of our tool, people have a slightly different people have different perspectives about it, right? Because their application, might not be the super important drafting of the full application, but just interesting how the search results on IP author bring about element-wise mapping that is super accurate, for example, right? To me, it was obvious, but it saves somebody's day.
Fantastic. And so that must be quite exciting that, being on the side of the development, but then you're getting the clients who are getting excited about the different features and seeing those different potentials. Are you getting a sense as well of how they are then deploying it through their business? Do you get a sense of, because I'm trying to imagine different types of people, so not just the early adopters, but also those who adopt and get very enthusiastic and involved in it, and they really use it for everything, or they see how it can kind of scale and expand through the business, versus those who go, okay, this is useful for certain things. I'm going to limit it to these particular activities because I quite like to have control over these other kinds of activities. And so I'm going to use it, but I'm going to limit it in some ways. Do you see those two groups of people perhaps? And also for the group that's very enthusiastic, what do you see them being particularly enthusiastic about, and how they're kind of scaling it through their particular business in the legal space?
That's a very interesting thought as well. Again, yes, there are different behaviors for different kind of people. As I said, like, I'll take the same example. A person using IP author also uses drafting, but feels, hey, I think the search part and the integration of the search part is much more interesting for me as an option overall, right? So does that limit them in a way? No, not really. But there are people who are like, I think I'm going to limit use of AI to, for example, only using uh, let's say a response to an office action, because I have the universe is already defined for me, which means I have these 3 patent applications or a non-patent literature article that has been cited, and I'm working with this limited universe, and therefore I can query AI around these 4 or 5 let's say applications or articles, and then see what is similar with my application, and is the examiner in this case also on the same page as what I thought was the case. And it's all disclosed, so therefore I have no downside to using AI. Versus people who feel, yes, if they understand the system well, they know that even when we share information which is confidential, obviously it is not there isn't going to be any digital footprint of it ever, because if they understand the infrastructure, the way it's set up, the way models are configured in various ways to protect privacy and confidentiality. So therefore different people there are obviously groups and profiles of people that see these things in different lights. And of course, does that lead to some sort of looking around? Yes, I would think so. And what I've also seen as a behavior, and I've seen this more in Europe than I've seen this in the US, is that many firms themselves have created a sort of an internal AI system, right, which they've built themselves. They understand this more, therefore they are more lenient towards relying on it than what they don't understand. So therefore, it's always very important to understand the system that you're using. So if you do not understand the system that has been bought for you by your company, you're more likely to be a little hesitant, because with IP, onus of privilege, the onus of confidentiality lies on you as a person, as a practitioner. And obviously, so because there are so many of these ways and means in which people have access to these tools, that leads to so many behaviors. Do I understand the system well? Right? Is IP author, for example, explicit in telling me or messaging as to how the data goes in, where it gets stored, does it get stored, does it get used or not? Or am I just flicking in thin air? I don't know. Or is this system, for example, deployed in my own machine for my own small use? Right? And number one. Number two, also, what do I like it doing for me? Where am I comfortable? What am I comfortable? What works also for my work? So many of these dynamics therefore creates different kinds of people and behaviors on.
Of course.
Yeah, there are adopters who latch onto it, and or there are some who are hesitant and they need more time.
Yeah, of course, like anybody interacting with new technology. And there's always going to be the people who are like, this is the new craze and this is the new thing and everybody has to try it. And there are others who are going to be like, I'm very happy with my traditional way of doing things and I'll wait for everything to settle down and then I'll see if I'm interested or not. But you mentioned the European side of things. And because obviously you're based in Europe, but you're also interacting with clients in the US, do you notice a difference in attitude between those in Europe and those in the US in terms of people adopting the technology and using the technology?
I would say yes.
Okay.
I would say yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
There are so people in Europe are very, as you would imagine, they have a slightly different approach towards data privacy and safety of information compared to the US or rest of the world. And that's the first right away behavioral change that people have. Does it mean that people in Europe do not use? No, that doesn't mean that. It's just that people in Europe, they want more information. They want to be sure. That's the first change, I would say. But when they understand the system, I think people here are more likely to use the system more and more to, extract those efficiencies and extract that quality value out of it.
Well, I mean, as you were saying, that must be really nice in some ways because, again, that cross-pollination, if you're interacting with the cowboys of the US who are like, let's go, we'll think about safety and security later on. And then you're interacting with the Europeans who are kind of going, we need to be sure, we need to be careful, we need to be safe. Then that's really lovely for a company that's building something between the two different worlds, because that means that you can take the enthusiasm from the US, but you can also take the safeguarding and that kind of cautiousness from the Europeans and build something.
I wouldn't say
really
up and running and then
it's just the stereotype.
Meaning, it's not that people in America are less. I mean, the risk aversity is different.
Yes.
It is slightly. So people in Europe, because generally speaking, data privacy rules and regulations in Europe are slightly more stringent, right? And people see everybody talking about it, so therefore that's the behavior that people have. In America, obviously, now if you see, I think a day or two before a certain mayor in California, that is crazy that they were acting on behalf of, or rather taking some information from China, right? So people in America are also risk averse. So they obviously care about data privacy as well, as much as the next guy, right?
Of course.
But that is like in my line of work, obviously, I've seen people or German companies or generally European companies using more time to discuss this than the counterparts in America. Not to say that those guys are don't worry about risk, or data privacy and such. It's just that it's a different behavior. So people here are wired slightly differently.
Okay, of course. And then do you notice any differences between the US Patent Office and the European Patent Office, especially now with this new technology? Are they having different approaches or reactions to it, or is there a bit of a consensus? What are you observing there?
More or less, with respect to, let's take a step back. So with respect to the allowability, USPTO came up with the guidelines of the use of AI tools, I think 1.5 years or something like that ago. And the general consensus from ruling was that practitioners can obviously use AI tools. They can So if I was to read it and then interpret it, means that AI should be used as a skill multiplier rather than you replacing your own wit and your duty towards that profession overall, right? So which means patent attorneys still have the onus of diligence, still have the onus of disclosure on them, and like that various other duties that they have towards the practice. But yes, to do the daily job, to read the whole paragraph quickly, or to interpret a certain patent application quickly, to be able to then map it to a certain claim, you could use AI to multiply these, let's say, more heavy lifting stuff, or to draft a patent application's language, and so on and so forth. And that was the overall, let's say, interpretation. And in Europe at the time, of course, we have had evolutions here as well. It was governed by the EU AI Act. Right. So there wasn't a specific EPO based, let's call it a ruling, but obviously now there's more and more information coming out, which also was governed over, define your risk. So is it a very specific, highly critical aspect that you're working with? So therefore you have to act in a slightly different fashion. Overall, the consensus here in Europe or in the US is no patent office stops you from using the tools as you want to. But again, as I said earlier as well, the whole onus is on you to understand what you're dealing with, to understand this is just a multiplier. You have to the duty of diligence, the duty of disclosure, the duty of saying what you've read it, and therefore you're submitting it to me with some information. Obviously resides with the practitioner. But there are also other things, like for example, EU and US. So, for example, for a large period of time, there was a lot of, hue and cry. It's a different whole thing if we talk about that, which is the AI as an invention, right? So, for example, can you patent a software? Can you patent an AI? So there also now things are converging. So here it was very difficult to get a software patent compared to the rest of the world. But now also there things are converging. So as long as you are able to, for an AI invention, just very let's say, I don't want to talk about it in more detail, neither in very intricate terms, but I'll just summarize it to say patent offices allow in Europe, and they're also in the US now, as I said, there's convergence, is that if you're able to show how a certain AI invention, let's say in this case, a computer implemented method is working with a certain hardware for a certain application, as it's using a certain physical memory or a certain processor for doing something, as long as that is defined well, you're able to get the patent for that aspect here in Europe and also now in the US. So there's also convergence of rulings in that respect as well. So yeah, a lot of regulatory agencies or patent offices are also researching and aligning their practices in a fashion that would allow more AI to be incorporated in research, patent attorney works and such.
Okay, so definitely, AI is here to stay, and it's all about how do you incorporate it into your workflow? How are you using it as your tool or your skills multiplier, as we were saying, and what kind of adoption are you bringing into your daily life and your work life of AI. So Sumair, for our last question, as we like to kind of end off, I know that previously we talked about you using AI for your plants and your grass growing. What is another thing that you are using AI or maybe agentic AI to manage for you at the moment?
Since the last time, there's one interesting thing I also did is not so far from where I live. There is a road. It's supposed to be very, very nice. The Black Forest stretch.
Oh, wow.
From Baden-Baden to Freudstadt. And I wanted to take that road. It's called B5. So B is Bundesstraße. It's like the country road, let's call it, if I used to like literally translate it, the number 500. And I wanted to sort of like go to and fro on the whole road. I did not know it very well. Obviously, so many people have gone there, they've written about it. But what I wanted to do is was to understand where should I start, because I live in the middle somewhere, or not exactly on the road, right? So I had to.
Is this one of those roads in Germany where there's no speed limit? Is that
No, that is
oh,
an
okay.
autobahn.
Oh, okay.
That is like a different thing. So
Different
autobahns
kind of
are like,
experience.
yeah, those are like motorways,
Okay,
right?
okay.
In English, we call them motorways. Autobahns have not all, but various autobahns have no speed limits. But some have obviously speed limits, and there are so many autobahns where there is some sort of construction going on, therefore speed limits apply. But
Okay.
this is a country road, which means
Right.
it's not a motorway.
Okay.
And it's a slightly more a traditional country road going through the forest and so on and so
Oh,
forth. Therefore, it's
wow.
not like no speed limit.
Okay.
And along the way, there are various attractions, right?
Sure.
Small lakes, some hikes, and so on and so forth. So what I wanted to do is to absorb all this information from the internet and then help me plan where I should start, what all
Fantastic.
stops I should make, and how I should end. And I used AI to sort of like do that. And whenever the weather allows, a full day, I'm going to make that trip.
Fantastic. Well, I am really looking forward to hearing your
And what are you
update.
doing though? What are you doing?
Well, so I'm talking about the kind of film acting side of things. I've been starting a project with a friend, and we've been in the process of designing all of the materials, the kind of branding materials for our project. We're kind of creating a project around intellectual discussions, creating community, all of that sort of thing. And so what we wanted to do was take 2 pictures of us and change it to kind of put ourselves in a late 19th century cafe, intellectual cafe. And it's incredible because I can imagine the hours and hours and hours of design work that it would have taken for somebody to illustrate and take our pictures and put us into this. And my friend who's a designer, she was using ChatGPT to change the images. And then suddenly we had this whole set of new design works, which were incredible. And kind of, just within an afternoon, we had the design that we were looking for. So that's what I have been using AI to do for me
Cool.
recently, whilst I
Cool.
speak.
That is super cool. Yeah.
So thank you very much, Sumair. It has been a wonderful chat to you this week, and I hope that we will have more coming in the future.
Of course, it was great to discuss all these things and developments and all of these aspects of adoption. Happy to chat and talk to you again soon. And bye to everybody as well.
Goodbye.